Remember the name!
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Remember the Name on ARD. My name is Talha, and if you've been a regular viewer of All Rounders, then you probably know me as a guest on multiple shows. And it's a pleasure to finally host a show as well. And joining me for the first episode is Imad, who has already his own show on ARD, 30 Yard Circle. Imad, how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited for your new show and your new hosting duties.
To start off, I'll briefly explain the concept of the show. Obviously, remember the name, it evokes that famous commentary line by Ian Bishop in the 2016 World Cup final. So, this show is basically a run down memory lane. I think this is such a tumultuous time in Pakistan cricket that there is no better time to just look back on the good and the bad moments and reminisce and feel a bit nostalgic. So every day every upload will be timed with um, some events that happened on the same day in the past. For example, this episode, the first episode, will come out on the 3rd of November. So we'll discuss things that happened on the 3rd of November in previous years, not just related to Pakistan cricket. It will be some cricketing events that are more global in nature as well. But I think for this first episode, we'll focus mainly on things that impacted Pakistan the most. And the first event that we'll look back at happened on the 3rd of November in 2011, and it was Salman Butt, Mohammad Asif, and Mohammad Amir being found guilty by an English court of attempting to fix or successfully engaging in spot fixing in the law. With the ill-fated tour of Australia at the beginning of the year, and then kept going downwards throughout the year. And when we reached the fourth test at Lords, the series was strangely up for grabs. I mean, Pakistan couldn't win the series because they were down 2-1, but they had won the previous test match, and their bowlers, especially Asif and Amir, looked in tremendous form that summer. So, first of all, Imad, I would like to ask you, were you watching cricket at that time? Do you have any memories of that period?
Yeah, so interestingly, I was not watching cricket at that time, but I do remember news channels broadcasting this news about the spot fixing scandal 24/7. I remember my parents were following this very closely, and so I was there playing with my toys, but also hearing what's going on TV. Absolutely, I think you mentioned how it's the deepest pit and one of the darkest times for Pakistan cricket. That is true, and whenever I think about that scandal, those pictures of people from management and the players holding newspapers of this scandal in the Lord's balcony, that comes to my head, and that really shows how horrible things were. That the game was essentially interrupted, in fact, totally disrupted by the scandal that happened. Yeah. So that answers your question. I wasn't watching cricket, but I was definitely following somehow, and it did sort of shape me as a cricket fan when I became one later on.
That's like a really traumatic image, I think, to look back. क्योंकि उधर लॉर्ड्स की balcony पे आप खड़े हैं. It's the home of cricket. It's like the most like revered ground. और आपके टीम मैनेजर ने अखबार पकड़ी हुई है, and it says like the headline is about your main bowlers and your captain being like caught in a sting, in a spot fixing sting. और अभी भी वो अगर image mind में आए तो it's traumatizing. Like it seems incredible that actually happened, considering like all the years of stability that came after it. But we'll get to that later. And as for like my experience, I think it's similar to yours. क्योंकि उस वक्त I was 10 years old and I wasn't watching every match, especially not test matches. Test matches के लिए I think उस वक्त attention span ही नहीं था. And I was not living in Pakistan, so matches इतना देखना आसान भी नहीं था. You had to like find some stream on some site, which in 2010 was harder than today. And I also heard the news on TV. लेकिन उस वक्त मुझे समझ नहीं आती थी कि spot fixing, like what is that? Like I didn't know the concept of fixing itself. क्योंकि उससे पहले इस तरह का कुछ 90s में हुआ था obviously, but that was way before like even I was born. So that's how I found out like match fixing is a thing, spot fixing is a thing, and it happened to like it was done by a Pakistani player, which obviously it took some time to sink in even for me. क्योंकि उस वक्त तो मुझे यही पता था बस कि आसिफ और आमिर बैन हो गए हैं. I wasn't a Salman Butt fan anyway, so I didn't care. But the fact that Asif and Amir weren't there, like it did make me really sad. And even when the 2011 World Cup came around and um, they weren't in the squad, like it really impacted me as a kid, because I remember watching the 2009 World Cup. I remember watching the Asia Cup in 2010, and really Amir especially. I think he was the first fast bowler that I loved. And as a Pakistani fan, there's going to be many fast bowlers that you're going to love, but I think the first fast bowler that you love really like impacts you as a fan the most. So what I want to ask you is, um, do you think like if Asif and Amir were in that 2011 squad, would things have been better? Could we have won the World Cup? And more like broadly, how massive do you think was their loss in the next few years?
Yeah. I mean, we know that Amir was 18 at the time of the scandal, and again, in my head, I can still hear those news channels saying कि मोहम्मद आमिर के लिए कोई रियायत होगी क्योंकि वो सिर्फ 18 साल के हैं. Like this was I distinctly remember this line being used again and again on news channels. So yeah, that shows that Amir, if he was doing that well at that age, he would have he would have basically been a beast in his prime, which obviously sort of comes later on. Uh, so yeah, definitely 2011 का जो वर्ल्ड कप था उसका रिजल्ट जो है वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा मतलब डिफरेंट हो सकता था. It could have been much more different. Maybe we would have gotten early wickets with the new ball, probably first 2 overs mein, against India in the semi-final. Uh, I mean that essentially changes everything if we get Sachin and Sehwag out in the first 3 overs. And so and Amir is someone who is essentially capable of doing that. आसिफ के बारे में तो लोग कहते हैं कि he might have surpassed Wasim Akram as a bowler. A lot of people disagree with that as well, but that shows that he was also one of the most genius bowlers out there, and essentially would have done great for Pakistan cricket in test matches that followed. We went to New Zealand, I think, after that, but even uske alawa bhi in limited overs as well in ODI cricket 2011 का World Cup. I think I think if these two had been there, our side was just too good to not win the World Cup.
Yeah, and actually we won that series in New Zealand 1-0, I think in early 2011. And another question I have regarding like this what if scenario, do you think agar Asif or Amir ban na hote, um, that would have been like the end of Shoaib Akhtar's career? Like he wouldn't have made a comeback in the 2011 World Cup.
Okay, so Pakistan cricket is prone to comebacks of legends who obviously उन्होंने अच्छा किया होता है पूरे अपने career में, but then we sort of just overuse them. So yeah, वो Shoaib Akhtar वाला comeback maybe it happened and it didn't turn out really well, but yeah, if we look at that squad जिसमें जो है वो we had Umar Gul, Wahab Riaz, and Shoaib Akhtar, and I don't know, I'm forgetting another fast bowler, I
And
think.
Junaid Khan, who didn't
Yeah,
play.
Junaid Khan. So अगर इनके साथ आसिफ एंड आमिर होते तो definitely Shoaib Akhtar wouldn't have been there. Yeah. Actually, it was Shoaib Akhtar who got injured in the middle, right? In the middle of the World Cup.
I know he wasn't injured. He got dropped after that New Zealand match. Thank you, Kamran Akmal, for that. Anyway, moving on. Another event. I think we started off with a really awful, awful event. Let's move on to a better one. Let's move forward 3 years on the 3rd of November 2014, and it was the day that Pakistan sealed a Test series win against um, like our worst opponent in terms of results, Australia. So it was like if you imagine Pakistan winning a Test series against Australia, you might think कि मतलब बहुत ही मुश्किल से बहुत ही मतलब it must have been like a lot of big names who struggled to get the win against such a mighty team. But it was a bowling attack of Imran Khan, Rahat Ali, Zulfikar Babar, and Yasir Shah, who like blew away Australia. It was not even close. So again, first question to you is like, how do you remember that series? Did you watch it? And like, how do you think it impacted that UAE era of our Test team under Misbah?
I love the contrast of our discussion that we were basically in the darkest pits of Pakistan cricket, and now we are into one of the best eras of Pakistan cricket. Yeah, I did watch that series. Yeah, I did watch that series, and basically it was something between watching and following. And yeah. I distinctly remember how well we played. I distinctly remember Misbah's century, that 56 ball century. That was amazing as well. And it was essentially surprising for everyone because yeah, I know Pakistan was sort of dominating in UAE for quite some time, but still we never expected that we would defeat Australia out of every team, and as you mentioned, in such a fashion that we essentially just blew them away. So yeah, I was there, I was watching, and that series I think summed up Misbah and Pakistan in UAE, and how clinical they were in that phase. And essentially, if we look at all the series Pakistan played in UAE, I think it has to come out on top. I think it goes even over the 2012 3-0 against England as well, right? What do you think?
I definitely agree with that. क्योंकि obviously the similarities between the two opponents are कि दोनों टीमों ने Ashes जीती हुई थी, and they were considered like if not the best team in the world, then pretty close to it. So I think what makes the difference here is that we've beaten England multiple times. We've come close to beating them even in England this century. With Australia, it's totally opposite. क्योंकि अगर उसके बाद वाली सीरीज भी देखो 2018 में जब वो यूएई में आए थे and the 2022 series, so they competed very well. Like I think 2018 mein they drew a test match thanks to like a massive innings by Khawaja in the last innings, which is pretty rare in the UAE. के fourth innings में आप इतनी लंबी innings खेल जाओ and you draw a match. And in 2022 we all know what happened with the flat pitches and everything. So I think that the series stands out regarding like us dominating Australia at home or in the UAE, and it does, I think, represent the peak of the Misbah era. 2015 may we beat England in the UAE as well, 2-0, but I think this series is definitely more special because I mentioned the bowling attack. I mean, Imran Khan and Rahat Ali as your pace attack is like iconic, I think, in hindsight. Even Yasir Shah making his debut and Zulfikar Babar having like proving Misbah's like theory of always having a left arm spinner in the 11, right? I think right now like Noman Ali proved that right again with his performance against England. So I think yeah, it's definitely the high point of the Misbah era, and I think it's a nice segue to move 2 years into the future from that to the end of the Misbah era at home at least, because on the 3rd of November 2016 we lost a test to the West Indies in the third test. It was a dead rubber, but it was notable because it was a match that you would not expect Pakistan to lose in that era against like a much weaker team in the West Indies. And it was also notable because Craig Brathwaite became the first test opener to carry his bat in both innings, in the second and the fourth innings. And in the fourth innings, he led West Indies through the target alongside Shane Dowrich. So again, what are your memories of that series and of that year broadly? Because a lot happened in 2016, 2017 with Miss Panyos's retirement. So how do you see that like kind of end of an era? Like how do you remember it?
It's just very sad that Misbah, who probably won every single game in UAE as captain, besides some games, I think obviously Brendan McCullum's masterclass. Uh, I think in Sharjah, I don't remember कहाँ था वो.
Yeah, it was in Sharjah, yeah.
Yeah, probably that, and probably some South Africa games. इसके अलावा Misbah basically won everything in UAE. It's just very sad that he lost. He lost his last game. But I think that really represents how underrated Craig Brathwaite is as a cricketer, and it's just and once again very sad that West Indies, in its decline, is not able to play more Test cricket. Otherwise, Craig Brathwaite would be much more talked about when we talk about great test openers in this current age. So yeah, that is one part of it. In terms of my memories, yeah, I mean I basically watched every ball of that series. That's like the peak of my me being a fan of Pakistan cricket. I remember there was this first day night test match and hosted by Pakistan. So that went really close. Yasir Shah. There was a resistance by Darren Bravo. Yasir Shah took that incredible catch to dismiss him. So yeah, उस वाले match में I distinctly remember that the spinners were not taking the wickets at all, and the pitch was very dry. So essentially, the ones with pace and bounce were really successful. So I had predicted on the first day to my friends, like first session, your second session, make it. Wahab Riaz is gonna take a five for here, and that actually happened, which was insane. I mean, I'm not that good with predictions, so that happened. So Holder bowled really well in that game too. But yeah, so that game is essentially the end of Misbah in UAE, but th- that doesn't take anything away from his greatness.
Yeah, definitely. And um, I watched every ball of that series as well because I think that year was really special. It like started with the first season of the PSL, and then we had the T20 World Cup, which was not very good for Pakistan. It was also an end of an era, the end of Freedy's international career. लेकिन उसके बाद आई थिंक आईपीएल थी दो एक दो महीनों के लिए which I enjoyed as well because I just started watching it because there was no cricket and I was just like ignoring my studies at the time.
So, sort of add IPL के बारे में, that season was insane because RCB being my favorite team were so dominant, and then they choked in the final. Virat Kohli scored 400 in that tournament.
Yeah, 4 centuries. I remember. I was supporting Hyderabad actually, who beat RCB in the final.
Congratulations.
So I think so IPL के बाद इंग्लैंड का टेस्ट टूर स्टार्ट हुआ था and I had my summer vacations at the time, so I just watched every ball of that series and I loved it. I think it's still my favorite test series ever, even though we drew 2-2 and I think we should have won that series at least 2-1 क्योंकि तीसरा टेस्ट में आई थिंक लास्ट इनिंग्स में बहुत थर्ड इनिंग्स में बहुत बुरा collapse हुआ था आई थिंक आई डोंट रिमेम्बर अगर थर्ड इनिंग्स में या फोर्थ इनिंग्स में था
Stephen
बट
Finn with his reverse swing, I think.
yeah it was the third test at Edgbaston.
Yeah, third test Birmingham.
Yeah, और उसके बाद फोर्थ टेस्ट आई थिंक इट्स हार्ड टू डिसाइड लाइक अगर वो लॉर्ड्स वाला पहला टेस्ट और या ओवर वाला fourth test is better. Like, what do you think? Which one did you enjoy more?
Oh, it has to be the first test because जो excitement थी उस tour की, as you mentioned, summer vacations थी. I also watched every ball of that series. तो उसमें जो है वो the idea that Amir is making a comeback and test cricket at Lords, and that game just had too much lore with it. So उसमें फिर end में हमारा जीत जाना, and with those iconic celebrations, yeah, I would definitely take the Lords Villa game over the Oval game.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree क्योंकि I think there's a lot of like lore, as you mentioned, a lot of like stories that seemed like too good to be true, like Mispa's century and Amir taking the last wicket. Even in the last innings, I remember Amir took like the eighth wicket, and then on the next ball he got another wicket which was overturned on DRS. लेकिन उससे पहले like just the excitement of thinking okay, what if Amir ends this match with a hat trick, like that would be so iconic. He didn't end it with a hat trick. He still got like another wicket, but I think yeah that's also my favorite. Yeah, I think it's my favorite match that I ever watched, even better than the Champions Trophy final in my opinion, because it just felt like um, something that came together that was like building up for almost 6 years, 6 years under Misbah, and it culminated at Lords and then at the Oval again. So I think yeah, it was a great way for Misbah to end his like um, stint as test captain in the last year, and it ended like in an even like better moment in the West Indies with that wicket by Yasir Shah. So yeah, this third test it was a minor blip, but it like reminded us that like this era is coming to an end slowly because at its peak you couldn't like a team that was demolishing England and Australia in the UAE would definitely not lose to the West Indies. And you mentioned the first two test matches, even those like they were dragged pretty deep. वेस्ट इंडीज का अच्छा चांस था आई थिंक दोनों मैचेस में जीतने का फोर्थ इनिंग्स में बट even Yasir Shah was at his peak then. And you mentioned, I think Holder bowled pretty well in the last match, or half bowled well. But I think one of the most underrated bowlers in that series was Devendra Bishu, West Indies leggy. I think he got 18 or 19 wickets in the whole series, and he took like I think he almost turned the game around in the first match as well, third innings में, which gave the West Indies a chaseable target. But then again, as good as Bishu was, I think in that period, Yasir Shah was even better. And moving from one great Pakistani spinner to another, just to end this episode, we'll go back a bit further to 3rd of November of 1996, which was when Saklan Mushtaq became the first ODI spinner to take a hat trick against Zimbabwe. So obviously, neither of us, I think, ever watched Saklan play, but I think we can still see his legacy in the likes of Saeed Ajmal and other off spinners that dominated that era of the late 2000s to early 2010s until the ICC clamped down on chucking and illegal actions. So there was a really interesting Butta Fast episode. If you don't know Butta Fast, it's probably the best cricket podcast out there. You should check it out. There was a really interesting episode on Saglan Mushtaq. So maybe Imad, you've seen that episode as well. So probably you can expand on the themes and what was talked about in that episode by. It's hosted by Amar Naqvi and Usman Samiuddin, and Rehanul Haq was a guest on that episode.
Yeah, I watched that episode, and they basically showered their love for Sakran Mushtaq as they should. What a genius Pakistan had, and essentially he's someone who changed off spin in this game, and the fact that he did that with a correct action just shows that how incredible he was. And even Saeed Ajmal, as good as he is, he was not able to do that. And they mentioned how he worked with Saeed Ajmal fir baad mein, and even as someone who had been retired for like 15 years, he was still bowling with with the correct action under 15 degree. So yeah, and they mentioned how magicians like Saklan Mushtaq, they don't really care about the specifics, the dynamics, and or statistics or anything. They're just very creative, and they are, because they're magicians, na? So they believe in the divine, and they're basically what Rehan al-Haq, Samiuddin, and Emmerich said, they're malangs. So everything's gonna be fine, and then उस तरह का उनका attitude होता है. That's what we see in Saklan Mushtaq. We do criticize that now, looking at his coaching tenure, but as a cricketer, it really turned out for him because he was able to imagine things normal people won't be able to imagine. So essentially, Saklan Mushtaq was वाकई a wizard, मतलब, because they distinctly displayed कि नॉर्मल क्रिकेटर्स, नॉर्मल ऑफ स्पिनर्स वो चीज़ें नहीं सोच सकते जो वो कर रहे थे. सॉरी, आई शुड बी रिस्पेक्टिंग सच अ लेजेंड.
Yeah, definitely. Really, I couldn't put it in better words. And you mentioned that he did all that without exceeding with the correct action. I think obviously early 2010s when Ajmal and others were reported and banned. Obviously मतलब बहुत कॉमन चीज़ थी उन 2-3 सालों में कि किसी बॉलर का एक्शन रिपोर्ट हो जाए. Again, even in Saklan's era, the likes of Muralidharan, the likes of Shoaib Akhtar had their actions questioned and they were suspended. So it's not like कि उस वक्त किसी बॉलर का एक्शन चेक ही नहीं होता था. There was scrutiny, especially of bowlers from the subcontinent, about their actions. And the fact that Saklan was never banned for having a suspect action and still pulled off the Dusra so magically. I think I remember a match against England, I think 2001, where he bowled a Dusra that turned from leg stump to off stump, took the edge and went to slip. So that's like turning as much as a leg break. So I think magician is the perfect way to put it with the ball. You mentioned his coaching. I think obviously coaching and bowling or playing is two completely different things. So you don't always need to not every player makes the best coach, and not every coach needs to be an ex-player. So I think that's just like comparing apples to oranges. But with the ball, I think Saklan Mushtaq, after Warren and Kumble retired, I think in the mid 2000s, he really set the foundation for off spin to thrive for the next about 10 years with the likes of Ajmal, with the likes of Ashwin and Nathan Lyon, and so on. And I think it's really a nice coincidence that on the day he took his first ODI hat trick, he became the first spinner to take an ODI hat trick. Then 18 years later, we saw the first series of Yasir Shah, who then became the fastest test bowler to 200 wickets. I think that's a nice way to end this first episode with a tribute to a great spinner who was the custodian of probably a lost art in bowling right now. Hopefully we see it again, but to be honest, I don't see the Dusra coming back, and there was no better exponent of it than Saklan Mushtaq. Thank you, Mad, for joining me, and thank you for watching this first episode of Remember the Name on ARD. Stay tuned for more throwbacks and more trips through the memory lane. This is Talha signing off. Goodbye. Okay.